Hello everyone and welcome to Sew with Jessica. In today's video, I'll be sharing with you guys the making of this pencil skirt here. So this is a perfect pencil skirt. I think this is the best tutorial you will find here on YouTube on the making of a skirt, a padded skirt. So in this video, you get to learn how to make the hip pad, which you can see right here on your screen. You also get to learn how to make your pencil skirts with hip and butt allocation. Yes, it's not just cut the normal basic way. And then the last thing we are also going to learn is how to make this type of slit that we have right here. I've forgotten the name. You guys let me know in the comment section. But then this is all the things we are going to be learning in this tutorial. Also, this tutorial is very much beginner friendly because in the video I'll be sharing with you guys how to take your measurements, and I know you love that. So without any further ado, let's get into the tutorial of today proper. On your pattern paper, place 2 inches above the starting line and mark from your waist to your hip line. So the 2 inches is going to be for the waistband, and I usually use 9 inches for my hip line, and I'll rule out a straight line there. Now, my starting line is also going to serve as the waistline. So take your round waist measurement divided by 4 and mark whatever it gives you right there. We will not be needing a dart for this pattern, so just follow as you can see. On the hip line, take your round hip measurement, divide by 4 and mark on the hip line, and also bring that hip measurement to the full length, and this is everything for the front pattern. Go ahead and cut it out and we'll move over to the back piece. For the back pattern, first mark your zip allowance. I'm using 1.5 inch and I'll mark it from this side of the pattern paper as seen. After which, we'll bring back the front pattern and duplicate the exact measurements that we have right there. So once I'm done, I'll make sure to rule out the hip line on the back pattern, which is very important. This is basically everything for the back piece. Go ahead and cut out your pattern paper. We'll start with the front pattern for the hip pad. From the starting line there, mark 1.5 inch downwards. On the hip line, we'll mark 6 inches or 5 inches just as seen. And then from where we have the 1.5 inch that we just marked there, we'll mark downwards 13 inches or 14 inches depending on what you want, but 13 inches works fine. Go ahead and create a curve using your French curve or your freehand. At that hip area, make sure to blend the curve so it's not so sharp. And this is everything we need for the hip pad. Go ahead and cut it out. In order not to mix up the pattern, go ahead and draw your arrow placements on the side of the pattern. Next, we are drafting the back hip pad. First, you are going to mark 2 inches inwards from the zip allowance area. We need the hip pad to go close to the butt, but not exactly on the butt. Then mark 1.5 inch below and then we'll connect it down. Now, most people like to arc the lower part, but I prefer to arc the upper part. So mark 2 inches from that 1.5 inch, and when we have the 2 inches, mark 3 inches. Now, place your tape from the top part and mark 13 inches and make sure that it aligns with the length of the front piece. That is the main aim. So like I said, some people prefer to arc the lower part, but I prefer to arc the upper part. So I just went in with my free hand to create a curve to meet that point, and then I blended it into the hip line. You can use your French curve or your free hand, and we'll also create a curve from the full length to meet the hip line. Make sure that no point is sharp. Just take your time to blend it out properly, just as seen. Now we can cut it out. So I have both my front and back pattern for the hip pad ready, and the arrow placement shows how they will be sewn together. I'll be using the 1/2 inch size foam for this. You can use the 1 inch if you want, and I'll also be using this canvas gum here to seal up the padded work so it looks more professional and clean. So it has 2 faces, and this face that has this white dot here is the part that has the glue. Now place your pattern on your foam using your pins to secure them at each edge so they don't move while you're cutting it out. Now that we've secured that, we'll bring in another piece of foam because we need to cut out 2 pieces for each of them. Cut it out with your sewing allowance. I'm using 1/2 inch for my sewing allowance. I would say this is totally optional, but yes, we don't want to mess up the pattern, so notch along the arrow placement along the midpoint area. I also went for that to notch the top part because most times we can mistake the top for the bottom part. We can go ahead and attach this together, but I didn't stop here. I wanted to double pad the center part. So go ahead and trace out a circle using your free hand on both the front pattern and the back pattern. Make sure that they are equal. Now cut out double foam for each of this pattern, making sure that the patterns are indicated with F for front and B for back so we don't mix them up. Place the smaller foam on the bigger one. You can use the notch area as a guide to place them properly. Now take this to your sewing machine and sew them together. This is going to give us a more blended look and a more natural look. That's why I said this is totally optional. Just a simple tip, make sure you're using a loose stitch while sewing this together for easy sewing. And we'll do this to all the other 3 pieces that are left. Now blend out the edge of your foam. Blending this with scissors might be challenging for some of you, so you can use your razor or even use your hand to pick out the foam, but I'm very okay with using my scissors to blend this out. So we'll blend it out because we'll be attaching another hip part to that part and we don't need it to be very bulky. You can also blend out the whole edge of the foam, and that's going to give it more natural. It's going to blend in with your body shape. And if you are using a 1-inch foam, a 1-inch size foam, make sure to blend. It's a must to blend if you are using a big foam. Now we are going to make this look more professional by using this canvas gum that I showed us earlier. I made sure to place the shiny face on the foam, and then I'll go ahead and iron it out. So the heat from the iron is going to glue this canvas gum, to the foam itself, and that's going to conceal it. It looks more professional, it is more neat. Your foam is not going to tear off once you have it secured in this canvas gum. So it's very important to do this. We're going to do this to all the pieces that we have. Now it's time to attach the parts together, the front and the back. Now you see the area that I blended, you see it's going to make it easy for us to sew. So if you do not have a manual machine that can do a zigzag stitch for you, you can still use your regular machine and just sew it together just as seen, the normal way. But since I have this, why not make a much more neater stuff? So I will just use a zigzag stitch for mine. Double padding or double foaming the center area is going to give it a nice effect at the hip area and also a more blended look. This is what it looks like, and I repeat same process to the other hip part. Now both hip pads are ready, and it's time to make the actual skirt with the butt and hip allocation and also that slit that I showed you guys. But we are not going to be using the hip measurements that we used to make this hip pad to make the actual skirt. The hip is going to be bigger because obviously there will be a hip pad in it, and this is how to take that measurement. So I just finished sewing the hip pad to the lining, and I remembered I did not record the clip of me taking the measurements, which I wanted to show you guys. So I'm just going to show you guys now. So this is the hip pad. We are going to assume that we have not attached it to the lining. This is the hip pad. So this is what you are going to do. You place each of them on your hip like this. Let's just assume there is nothing here. You just place it on your hip and then use your pins to hold this to your body. Just let's say you're wearing something like a skirt or leggings. Use your pin to pin it to what you are wearing. Once you've done that, you also pin this second one. You also pin the second pad here. So once you've pinned it to your body, you will take your measuring tape and now measure your hip area. And that was how I was able to get 44. I hope this explanation helps. For the making of the skirt, I have this African print, 100% cotton fabric here, and I have it in 2 yards. I have a matching zip, I have my chalk, I have my scissors, measuring tape, ruler, and a cotton lining here. Open up the 2 yards of fabric that we have here. So if you are way on the bigger size, let's say size 16, you might consider using 2.5 yards of fabric because our hip measurement has already changed. My regular hip measurement is 42, but because of the hip pad, I am using 44. So fold down your whole 2 yards into 2. Right at the open end of this folded fabric, mark 4 inches, which is going to serve for the zip allowance and also for the hip and butt allocation allowance. Now we'll connect these 4 inches to form a straight line just as seen. Pick up the folded end of the fabric and place right on the chalked line. This way we'll be able to cut out both the front piece and the back piece of the skirt, and also with the right hip and butt allocation. Mark out your starting line, leaving half an inch at the top part, which will be used to attach the skirt to the waistband. Place 2 inches on the starting line and mark from your waist to your hip line. Remember the 2 inches we placed outside is for the waistband. From my waist to my hip line is 9 inches. I'll mark it and make a straight line there. Extend the line to the zip allowance. Leaving 2 inches outside your starting line, mark from your waist to your knee line, which I'm using 24 for mine. Rule out a straight line and extend it to the zip allowance. Leaving 2 inches at the starting line, mark from your waist to your full length. This should also include your hemming allowance. On the starting line, take your round waist measurements, divide by 4 and mark what it gives you. Make sure you're placing this from where we have the folded fabric. Ignore the zip allowance. Let's take the measurements for the hip and butt allocation. So my round hip measurement is 44 inches. That is the total of my hip, which includes the hip pad. The fabric is folded into 4, which includes the front and back piece, and that enables us to cut out everything at once. So we note down the 4 there. Now we have front and we have back. So 44 divided by 4 gives us 11. So 11 inches for the front unfold and 11 inches for the back unfold. So by the time we do 11 plus 11, we have 22, and 11 for back, we have 22, and altogether it still gives us the 44. If you're making a basic skirt, you can just go ahead and apply the 11 inches. But for the hip and butt allocation, the back piece of your skirt is supposed to be bigger than the front piece, and that's because of the bum, which is at the back. So for the front, I'm going to subtract 1 inch from this 11 inches, and that is the measurement I will use for the front hip line, which is 10. And then for the back, I'm going to add that 1 inch that I took from the front piece to the back, which gives me 12. So this way you can see that my back piece is now 2 inches bigger than the front piece. So 10 plus 12 gives me 22. 20 plus 22 still gives me back my 44. On the hip line, we'll take the front hip measurements, starting from the folded line. Ignore the zip allowance. So we'll place your tape right there and we'll mark 10 inches, which is the front hip measurements that we just calculated. Mind you, we've not added any sewing allowance yet. For the back hip line, place your tape from these 10 inches that we have at the front piece and mark the 12 inches in the opposite direction, just as seen. This way, the 12 inches will have to fall on the zip allowance. Go ahead and connect your hip measurement to your waistline, just as seen, and then connect this back hip measurement to the waistline. On the knee line, take your actual hip measurement, which is 42 for mine, the real hip measurement, divide it by 4 and mark it on the knee line. Go ahead and connect your hip measurement to this knee line, and then also for this back piece, we're also going to connect it to meet the knee line, just as seen. You can see the only difference is the hip, which came out more, and it's because of the butt and the hip allocation. On the full length, subtract 1 inch from this hip measurement that we have on the knee line and mark it on the full length. Connect a straight line from that knee line to the full length. For the back piece, you can decide to mark how many inches you want for your slits, but I decided to use the knee line for my slit since it's a pencil skirt, so I'll just maintain whatever measurements that I have left at that point there. Now go ahead and add your sewing allowance. I'm using 1.5 inch for my sewing allowance. Connect your sewing allowance together just as seen. Over to this side, mark your zip allowance, which I'm also using 1.5 inch, but the zip allowance will stop at the knee line, because whatever is left from the knee line downwards will be for the slits. Now we can proceed to cut out the skirt piece. Now this is what it looks like. Here we have the front piece, which is on fold, and the other piece is the back piece, which we cut separately. Next, we'll cut out lining pieces for both the front and back piece. Starting with the lining piece, open up the front piece. Now place the back piece on the front piece. Make sure that the side seams align, that is the hip area, just as you can see in this video. Now sew up the 1.5 inch that we added for seam allowance, just as indicated. Totally optional, but you can chalk out your 1.5 inch before going to attach it together. After sewing this together, give it a good press by opening up the seam. Now it's time to attach the hip pad. First of all, we'll mark 1/2 inch, which is the starting line, which is the allowance we use to attach the skirt to the waistband. From that 1/2 inch, go ahead and mark your 1.5 inch, which is where your hip pad should be placed on. So you place it just as seen, and you use your pins to secure the midpoint of the hip pad to the sewing line that we have right there. Now take this to your sewing machine and make a stitch across that center part there, which would hold the hip pad down, and then also sew around the hip pad, which will give it that whole hip pad shape right there. So make sure you pin this to the lining before you sew. If not, you will find it a bit difficult, and then sew all around. We'll do this for both the hip pads, and if you've watched to this point, make sure to give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, because that'll help you to recommend this channel to other people. Now we are done fixing the hip pad on the lining. We'll proceed to attaching the skirt. So we've already sewn up the skirt the same way we sewed the lining together. The only difference is the lining carries all the rough work, not the main fabric. So now we'll place them right face facing each other and sew up as indicated. Sew only 1/2 inch all round except for the top part. After sewing, make sure to notch along any part that is looking a bit complicated, because when we flip this over, we need every single part to relax properly. So emphasis on the sharp edges and also the slits area. Now we can flip everything over to the right face and give every single thing a good press. After ironing, place them right face facing each other just as seen, and this is exactly how your piece should look before you finish it up. But before then, we are going to attach the waistband before we add the zip and then finish up. Flip open the skirt and take the round waist measurements of the skirts. And that gave me a total of 37 inches, but I'll be cutting a band that is 38 inches wide, 1 inch for seam allowance on both sides. So right here I have a folded fabric which was remaining from the piece that we used to just cut the skirt itself, and I marked 2.5 inch. Mind you, it is folded. I cut 2.5 inch, 1/2 inch will be used for the sewing allowance, and then we'll have the 2 inches right there as the waistband. And then I also made sure it was 38 inches long, which is longer than the actual measurement, which is 37. Now we'll proceed to fold the sides together. This is a closer view of how to sew them together. So just raise 1/2 inch up at one side and then sew down. Now that it is prepped, we can proceed to attach this to the skirt. We've successfully added the waistband, and you can see that everything is looking really nice and beautiful, and it all comes out really well. So now it's time for us to attach the zip and then finish up the slits. Also guys, you can notice that we do not have to weave this skirt again because everything is just very neat. There's no rough edge out. So mark where your zip allowance will stop, and where we have that point there, the remaining part we are going to sew up the 1 inch left, and you can decide to reshape this so that it can be very tight at the thighs area, but just sew up as indicated. After sewing, this is what everything looks like. We are not done yet. It's time to finally complete the slit area. So you're going to pin the slits. I'll just pass in my hand like as seen, and then use the pin to hold the allowance of the slit. Either you face it to the left or the right side, whichever ways, but just use your pin to hold the skirt to the allowance, and we're going to top stitch neatly along that part. So this way, no matter what, you will not be having issues of your slit tearing up. This is the best type of slits. And this brings us to the end of this tutorial. Just go ahead and give your skirt a really good press. And if you've watched to this point and you've not subscribed, please do well to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye.